grateful for what he's done, paying the ultimate sacrifice for his country. With that, I'd like to yield back to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Congressman Duffy. And with that, I would like to yield to another member that took the time over the Easter break to go to Afghanistan to visit with our troops, who was certainly a rock star when he appeared on the base and stopped to sign a bunch of autographs. Of course, he was the only one in which they were asking autographs of. But Congressman Runyon, I'll yield to the Congressman.
I'd like to thank my colleague and also all of my colleagues for really a great trip, a really great fact-finding trip. It was an opportunity to go over there in a bipartisan nature and really learn about what our troops go through on a daily basis and what they're doing for the Afghani people. But in the same light, to also really go learn about some other ally nations we have. Because when you boil all of this down, whether it is the Czechs, the Georgians, the Afghans, you know, the Azerbaijan people, we're all fighting for the same thing. We're all fighting for democracy, and we're all fighting for freedom. So it was truly an honor to go over there and learn firsthand about everything that is going on there. You know, the opportunity to really go out and see what our guys go through on a daily basis of being put in a camp there in western Afghanistan and see the relationships they're building with the Afghan people was tremendous. The support they have and building those friendships really allows our troops and all of our allied troops to go in there and make friends with them and help them defend their own country. You know, and no matter where we went on this trip, there was a sense of pride that everybody took in themselves and in their country and in their war fighters, that we were all out there fighting for democracy and freedom. And when you talk to the troops, you could really see it in their eyes, because even when they ask the question, what is the end? When is the end? Well, when you look at them and you deeply go, well, the end is to give these people the opportunities that we have. And the scary thing about it was a lot of the Afghani people don't understand what it is to live in a democracy, what it is to have freedom. You could always see the twinkle in our troops' eyes, you know, when you said that to them, because you could sense that, you know, some of them were thinking about, you know, when is this going to be over? But when you realize and just refresh their memory on really what they're fighting for, and they're not fighting for our freedom, they're fighting for other human beings' freedom. And it was truly an honor to go over there and witness that and experience that, and really to say thanks to all of them. As my colleague said, you know, there was I had somewhat of a rock star mentality over there. But everyone asked me, you know, can I get a picture? Can I have some time? I can't give you enough time in the world for what you're doing for us and what you're doing for, you know, other people around the world with the sacrifices you're making. And I say that, you know, on a day in and day out basis with every troop I ever meet with, and to really see, you know, when you got off into the villages and you see a group of guys that are living together in a camp out there. That's all they have. They're brothers, and you know, you could see them all. They were having beard growing contests throughout the camp. You know, some of them participated, some of them didn't, but they were taking a lot of pride in that type of stuff, and you know, just you know, keeping that morale going. It was great to see, because you knew what type of desperate situation they were in. But also, you know, I really think we all, when we got to that boot ceremony there at the end, where, you know, many of you have seen it before, where there's, you know, the boots with the M16 stuck in the middle, with the dog tags wrapped around the weapon and the helmet on top. You know, it was it was a somber reminder of the cost of freedom and the cost of democracy. And I really want to, along with my colleagues, to say thank you to everybody, because the one gentleman I want to recognize is Major David L. Broder. His actually call sign was Klepto, and throughout the ceremony, they would call the guys by their call signs. And when they went through the roll call and they keep calling these guys' names, the silence was deafening, because they kept calling his name, and there was no one answering as they went through the whole company. And I know quite a few of us were really brought to tears in that moment. But Major Broder was born on December 10, 1976. He was commissioned to the United States Air Force Academy in 1999, where he majored in political science. After graduating pilot training in 2001, he was a qualified F-16 pilot, and he was assigned to the Shaw Air Force Base, where he served as assistant weapons officer in the squadron. He next served at Luke Air Force Base as a scheduler, flight commander, and as weapons instructor pilot. At his next assignment in Ellison Air Force Base, he was chief of scheduling, an F-16 pilot, and the chief of the aggressor academics. Upon his deployment, he was assigned as chief executive officer to the 11th Air Force Command at Eldermoff Air Base. Major Broder deployed and served in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and was deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom as an air advisor to the Afghan Air Corps Command Center. He is survived by his wife Susan and his son David Jr., age 3, and his daughter Elizabeth. And it's truly guys like this that make the difference, that are a big reason why people like myself, I really think, get involved, is to support these heroes, to make sure they're known. Because yeah, we've suffered a loss here, but the true people that have suffered the ultimate loss are his family. They're not going to have a father. Myself being a father of 3, I realize that, I respect that. May God bless his soul, may God bless his family, and we thank him for his service. And with that being said, I yield back to my colleague from Louisiana.
Thank you, Congressman Runyon. I will now yield time to the Codell leader, which is Congressman Bill Shuster.
I thank the gentleman from Louisiana, and again, I thank the gentleman for securing this hour for us to be able to talk about our experience in Afghanistan, but also, and most importantly, to talk about and honor the 9 people that were killed in Afghanistan last week. And as I mentioned earlier, that was the largest loss of life in the U.S. Air Force since the Khobar Towers. As my colleague Mr. Runyon talked about, the somber and powerful experience that we had there at this memorial service, at the ceremony, it was really something to be there. We got there at the last minute, and I think we all were very, very grateful to be able to have participated in the ceremony. Again, 9 people were slain. We've already talked about the one that was not a military person, but a contractor. He served in the military, but then came back to serve in Afghanistan as a contractor and tried to help develop and train the Afghan Air Force. Another one of those members that gave the ultimate sacrifice is Lieutenant Colonel Frank D. Bryant, Jr. Lieutenant Bryant was born on August 13, 1973, and is from Knoxville, Tennessee. His military career began when he entered the U.S. Air Force Academy in the summer of 1991. After graduating from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1995 with a bachelor's degree in general engineering, Lieutenant Bryant was assigned to the Columbus Air Force Base, initially as a student pilot and then as a T-37 instructor pilot. Lieutenant Colonel Bryant's next aircraft was an F-16. In the F-16, he completed tours in Korea, Shaw Air Force Base, an exchange pilot with the UAE and Luke Air Force Base, and his last assignment was with CJCS, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Han, assigned to the 438th Air Expeditionary Wing in Kabul, Afghanistan. During his career, Lieutenant Bryant earned the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Air Force Combat Action Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal with One Oak Leaf Cluster, the Air Force Commendation Medal, One Oak Leaf Cluster, and the Air Force Achievement Medal, the Air Force Outstanding Unit with Valor Device and Second Oak Leaf Cluster, the Combat Readiness Medal, the National Defense Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Korean Defense Service Medal, the Afghan Campaign Medal, NATO Medal, the Air Force Overseas Ribbon, the Air Force Expeditionary Service Ribbon with a gold border with one Oak Leaf Cluster, and the Air Force Longevity Service with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, and finally the Air Force Training Ribbon. Somebody who served long and obviously by all those medals did a fabulous job serving the United States of America. And Lieutenant Bryant is survived by his wife Janice, his son Sean, his father Frank D. Bryant Sr., and his mother Patricia Bryant. We owe a deep debt of gratitude to his family and also to Colonel Bryant for their service to this country, and of course to the ultimate sacrifice that Colonel Bryant gave for his nation. So with that, I would encourage all Americans to remember Colonel Bryant and his family in their thoughts and their prayers. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman for the gentleman for Louisiana.
Thank you, Congressman Schuster. Right now I have the privilege to call upon another one of our colleagues who participated in the congressional delegation, who has not had an opportunity to talk about one of our fallen soldiers. But I will tell you something about this member of Congress. He himself has put his life in the line and served in our U.S. Air Force, and that is none other than Captain Adam Kazinga.
Well, thank you, and I thank the gentleman from Louisiana for setting this up. You know, one of I think the great things about when you talk about just in general America and what we stand for, there's a lot of disagreement. And but when it comes to supporting our troops, when it comes to what America stands for, there's no disagreement. And the gentleman from Louisiana and I have become great friends. And on this mission, we got to really go see what America stands for. And even though there's differences sometimes in where we should see foreign policy, and that's understandable and that's fine, there's no difference right now in supporting troops and supporting those who put their life on the line. Now, as a military pilot, I never would expect to be in a situation where myself and scores of my brothers and sisters would be killed by a mad gunman walking into a room. That's something that I'm sure these brave heroes that we're talking about never expected, but it happened. It was tragic, but they stood up and fought for their country, and in the process, they lost their lives. One of those brave heroes who lost his life is a fellow Illinoisan, Captain Nathan Nylander. Captain Nathan Nylander was born outside of Chicago, Illinois, and grew up in Illinois and Texas. His military career began in August 1994 with his enlistment in the United States Air Force. After completing basic military training and follow-on technical training in Texas, Florida, and Mississippi, he served as an enlisted weather forecaster, rising to the rank of technical sergeant. His enlisted assignments include weather forecaster at Luke Air Force Base, Arizona, and Seoul, Republic of South Korea, and culminated as the presidential weather forecaster at Camp David, Maryland. In 2006, Captain Nylander did what few do. He earned his commission through officer training school and ended as a distinguished graduate. As a weather officer, Captain Nylander held positions as a weather flight commander at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii and Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Arizona. Captain Nylander was most recently assigned as the lead weather advisor for the Afghan Air Force with the 438th Air Expeditionary Advisory Group. His awards include the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, Air Force Commendation Medal, with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, Joint Service Achievement Medal, and Air Force Achievement Medal. He's survived by his wife, son, daughter, 2 sons, and his father and mother. These brave heroes are an example of what's best about our country. And while we mourn their loss, we celebrate the freedom that they passed defending. So I'd say over the next couple of years, as we go forward and we debate really big issues here in Washington, and we have disagreement, never forget that we're all Americans. That's the most important thing. So to the 9 heroes, and to those who gave their lives already, to those who continue to serve every day, let me just humbly say on behalf of everybody in the United States Congress, on behalf of Americans, on behalf of a Republican and Democrat standing here in the chamber, united on this, thank you. Thank you for defending your country. Thank you for being an example for generations to come. We mourn for your loss, but now we celebrate the freedom that you defended. And I yield back to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we just have 1 or 2 more fallen heroes that we wanted to honor. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that this is just a short ceremony, but from the heart for the 10 people that we had a chance to participate in their ceremony. And for Private First Class Jonathan Villanueva, who was killed at the same time as Staff Sergeant Matthew Hermanson. But I wanted to take a minute to talk about Master Sergeant Tara Brown. She was born in July 21st, 1977. She began her military career in 1997 at the Kadena Air Force Base in Japan as an administrative clerk, quickly mastering her skills in communications and embracing a love of travel and adventure. Master Sergeant Brown completed assignments to Germany, Turkey, Alaska, Korea, before taking charge in numerous high-level communications positions at Andrews Air Force Base right down the street. Master Sergeant Brown's awards include the Bronze Star, posthumously, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Air Force Commendation Medal with 3 Oak Lever Clusters, and the Air Force Achievement Medal with 3 Oak Lever Clusters. She is survived by her husband, Ernest Brown, father, Jim Jacobs, mother, Gladys Vereen, brother, Jim Jacobs, Jr., and sister, LaQuanda Jacobs. Mr. Speaker, I will tell you that during this service, and when they talked about Master Sergeant Brown, they talked about her smile, they talked about her status as a newlywed, but more than anything, they just talked about her love of service and the fact that she was willing to give it all. So I wanted to make sure that we continued and we included Master Sergeant Tara Brown in our ceremony today, just to make sure that we don't forget any of our troops that we had the privilege and the opportunity to participate in their service and on their day. Mr. Speaker, I think that all of my colleagues, and I don't see them now, but I think all my colleagues have exhausted their time in making sure that they honor all of our fallen soldiers. And this was just one thing that we thought we wanted to do, to show the country that although we disagree on 20–30% of things in this body, and those 20 or 30% may be very gut-wrenching and they may be very divisive, and we may differ on how we cut programs. But every difference in principle is not necessarily a difference in purpose and a difference in our ultimate goal, and that's to make sure that this country continues to be the best country on earth. So we, as just a small part of this august body, and one that we're honored to be a part of, and we're honored to serve with so many senior members who have taken us under their wing to make sure that they nurture us. And, Mr. Speaker, we can't thank you enough for that. And we can't thank Congress and the American people for giving us the opportunity to go over to conflict, to watch Afghans as they start to patrol their own area. And I will tell you, and I'm not sure if Congressman Schuster touched on it, but we had an opportunity to patrol with a group of Afghans and their elders. And one of the elder that was over it was a very elderly man who was the commander of this police unit, and they were protecting the entrance into this city, and they had their checkpoint. While walking to the checkpoint, we saw a young man holding arms and protecting us as we walked, and we stopped to talk to him. And then they pointed out to us that he lost his father and his brother in a firefight just a week and a half ago while they were out patrolling. Then, as we talked to him just for a few minutes longer, he talked to us about the vision of freedom, and he was all excited, and his eyes were open very wide as he talked about why he was still patrolling after his father and his brother's funeral was the fact that he had a love for his country, for Afghanistan, but also because he felt an obligation because we had so many troops out there fighting and dying that we were joined at the hip because this was a very important goal. And it's not just to bring freedom to us, it's to bring freedom to people all across this world. Then as he was telling us that, he told us that just a couple of days before we got there, that his daughter drowned in a creek in their little village. So we're talking about a very young man who had tragedy 3 times in his life, who was still out there with his machine gun in the desert, in the heat, patrolling to make sure that this congressional delegation was safe, but also taking the time, and we watched him talk to school kids and other things. But that's what makes this country great. And the thing that united us all was the fact that what makes this country great, we're inspiring other people so that they want to make their country and their town and their village great just like America. So you have people all across this world that, and we can talk particularly about Afghanistan because that's where we saw it, that were going above and beyond because they appreciated our effort to help them, and they were committed to help themselves. And they said, we are in it with you, and we're going to sacrifice our life and our limbs just as those brave men and women in the United States are doing. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for allowing us to have this time to talk about the people we lost. And I will just end with reading their names because I think that we can't give them enough because they made and paid the ultimate sacrifice so that we could have the freedom that we enjoy and others could have it. And that was Lieutenant Colonel Frank D. Bryant, Jr., Major David L. Broder, Major Philip D. Ambard, Major Raymond Estelle, Major Jeffrey O. Osborne, Oz as they called him, Captain Charles A. Ransom, Captain Nathan J. Nylander, Retired Lieutenant Colonel James A. McLaughlin, Technical Sergeant Tara R. Brown, Private First Class Jonathan Villanueva, Staff Sergeant Matthew D. Hermanson. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time, and I want to thank the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, for this much-needed tribute, and I want to thank you for recognizing those individuals, the defenders of liberty of this great nation. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Carter, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we just got off 2 weeks of working in our districts around this country, and at least I held about 10 town hall meetings. I'm sure many of my colleagues held more. We talked about the debt, and we talked about the deficit. But one of the things that almost every one of these town halls insisted upon talking about was the high price of gasoline. Let's start with this first exhibit we have here. This just gives a comparison of what the gas prices were somewhere in the United States. I can't tell where. January of 2009, unleaded $1.32, mid-range 142, super 152. And here's a picture taken in April of 2011, regular $3.99, mid-range 409, the high-powered stuff $4.19 a gallon. Mr. Speaker, the only party that can be blamed for this, unfortunately, is the Democratic Party through their leadership of Barack Obama, the President of the United States. Because a vicious combination of the Obama administration's moratorium on offshore drilling and the devaluation of the American dollar through the administration's quantitative easing have resulted in the highest seasonal gasoline prices in U.S. history. We have reached a point where if we don't pay attention, we're going to give up our ability to produce our own natural resources and buy all of our, and be, as the President said to Brazil when he loaned them $2 billion or more, we'll be glad to be good customers of yours when you find some oil out in the Gulf. Mr. Speaker, this is a broken energy policy. In fact, this is no energy policy at all. We are quite aware now that we have found substantial reserves that were unfound in the area of natural gas. In fact, there are those who report that the production of shale gas in the United States could result in us having enough natural gas to operate in this country for at least 100 to 150 years at present or projected usages. And yet, we seem to have roadblocks thrown up in front of that production at every step. We had a deepwater accident, a terrible deepwater accident in the Gulf of Mexico. The President and the Energy Department put down a moratorium on drilling in the Gulf, both deep water and shallow water, even though the shallow water was not, they had no massive oil leaks in the shallow water, it was included. So the Gulf of Mexico, one of the largest potential oil and gas fields in the world, was shut down for American production, not for Chinese production, not for Brazilian production, or not for anybody else who had the ability to make a deal with Cuba to get a lease offshore to drill, but American production. But he promised that after they got all of the cleanup done and after they examined what happened in the BP case, that they would open up, lift the moratorium, and with a lot of outcry from the Gulf states, because for the first time, at least in the state of Texas, until the moratorium on drilling in the Gulf, the state of Texas was looking pretty good on unemployment. We were still in the 6% range, as the rest of the nation was in the 10% range. But when you shut down potentially 250,000 jobs that relate to the drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, I don't know how many of those jobs were actually lost, but those were the ones at risk. And as a result, that and other factors were now up into the 8% unemployment range, which is still better than the rest of the country, but still a really direct cause of the moratorium in the Gulf. And then when the moratorium was lifted, they refused to issue permits. But first, because the federal court told them to lift the moratorium, they lifted that moratorium and issued a new one the next day, or maybe 2 days later, which was, I would say, fairly much in contempt of the order of the federal court in Louisiana. That federal judge, in turn, made several comments about contempt of court. And so, finally, after years, the moratorium was lifted, and another 6 months later, or 8 months later, a few permits were issued so that drilling could begin. remember this. Barack Obama, when he became President of the United States, President Obama promised that he was going to open up offshore exploration and enhance nuclear energy. He's failed to do both. The only energy policy he's dealt with is one that we certainly need to develop. And no one here doesn't want to seek alternatives that are economically viable to make this country run. This country is an energy-driven country. Just look at the lights in this room. Think of the energy and the amount of windmills it would take just to power up this room almost 24 hours a day. But we're for, and in fact, I would say the great state of Texas has the largest wind farm in the entire United States. So when it comes to energy, we don't shy away from any kind of energy in our state. We are an energy state. And we have been producing oil and gas in the state of Texas for, I guess, close to 100 years. It's clear back to Spindletop. We are not the experts, but we're as close to experts as you're going to run into because we've been doing it through generations of Americans. I remember when I was 17 years old, my big desire was to go work on an oil rig because of the great pay those people got paid. My daddy wanted me to keep all my fingers, so he told me I couldn't do it. But I always wished I could. It is something we grow up with. We don't think oil and gas are evil products, and we don't think that they are the curse of this country. We think they are the primary clean power source in competition with other power sources of the petroleum age. And we think we do a good job of producing clean energy, and energy we think that is the cause of the great modern expansion of American government. Remember, when we're talking about petroleum products, we're not just talking about power for your automobiles and power for your trucks and power for your power stations and all the other things that we use with oil and gas. We're talking about plastic. We're talking about life-saving chemicals. We're talking about clothing. There's a list of 100 different products. I can't even list them all that have come from the production of petroleum. And now, for some reason, we have an administration that treats petroleum and treats petroleum products like natural gas as if they were some kind of horrible, evil poison because of this issue which is unresolved of carbon dioxide. So we are sitting here on the verge of something that will ultimately shut down our economy. You know, I can tell you from personal experience, because my wife sent me to the grocery store 3 Sundays ago, and one of the things on her list was avocados. And this is in Texas. We're pretty close to Mexico. We're pretty close to California. 2 avocados cost $1.25. The next week, she sent me back to get 2 more, and they were $1 a piece. So I started watching those things, and holy cow, they've gone up 3 times since that first purchase of avocados, and you wonder why. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's weather. Maybe it's a crop failure. Maybe it's the fact that the cost of energy is going up daily to power the fleet of trucks, to power the diesel-driven trains, to power the automobiles of America. And as gas prices go up or diesel prices go up, so do the prices of food. And now the 2 inflationary prices that we see going forward are food and energy. This is serious stuff. And I'm very pleased to have a fellow Texan join me here today, Blake Farenthold. He's a new member from down on the Texas Gulf Coast in a city that grew up with petroleum surrounding it, Corpus Christi, Texas. I'm going to yield to my good friend, Mr. Farenthold, whatever time he should need to talk about his views on energy.
Thank you very much, Judge. You know, I grew up in the oil and gas industry. My great-grandfather, Rand Morgan, came to Corpus Christi after the Great Depression and was one of the pioneers in the oil and gas industry in the Saxett Field by the Corpus Christi International Airport. We've been a farm and ranch and an oil and gas family since before I was born, since before my father was born, and since before my grandmother was born. Rand Morgan was actually my great-grandfather. And we can tell you, as landowners, as outdoorsmen, as hunters, and as fishermen, the oil and gas industry is a clean industry. The men and women who work in the oil and gas industry are committed to the environment. The landowners whose land is used for domestic oil and gas production are committed to making sure the oil and gas companies do a good job and keep their land in great shape. You know, you talk about offshore, too. Corpus Christi is the home to some of the largest fabricators of offshore oil and gas equipment in the world. Port of Brownsville has several industries building and refurbishing offshore oil and gas. And our fishermen love the offshore oil and gas rigs. They're artificial reefs. They're where you go to fish, not fishing for sport, but fishing for the fish you're going to take home and fry and eat. They're clean, and they're great for the environment. You know, we had a horrible accident with the BP well. Our beaches in some parts of the country suffered with some contamination. I think it's the second time I remember that happening in my lifetime. The first time it happened, there was a blowout of a well in the Gulf of Mexico operated by the state-run oil and gas company of Mexico. You know, not a whole lot happened with that one. We had tar balls coming up on the beaches of Corpus Christi. It was an annoyance, but we took some wipes, and you wiped your feet off after you got off the beach so you didn't get it on the carpet or your cars. But what we've done now as a result of the BP blowout is we've shut down the oil and gas industry, the American oil and gas industry in the Gulf of Mexico, while the Chinese, the Brazilians, and the Mexicans continue to drill in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's not a thing in the world we can do to stop them or regulate how they do it. Instead, we're penalizing our oil and gas companies in the United States. We're decreasing production that's available to fuel our cars, to power our electrical generating plants, and to create the hundreds of products that rely on oil and gas. Our focus is wrong. We should be looking at ways to increase production and increase safety and increase our ability to respond in the event there is another accident. We need to be training the Coast Guard. We need to be training our industry personnel. We need to be developing the technology to contain it and to protect our beaches from oil and gas spills that may happen as a result of the activities of any country in the world. We have the opportunity to be the technological leaders in this and get our domestic oil and gas industry back on track and get the price of gasoline back down to reasonable levels. We're getting to $4 and $5 a gallon gasoline. You know, that doesn't just ruin your summer vacation. It starts to ruin your life. You know, you can cut down on driving, you can take the bus, you can take public transportation, but those avocados Judge Carver was talking about, they can't. They've got to get to your grocery store in a truck. Every good or service that you use or buy is affected by the price of oil and gas. It's going to run the price of everything up. We have got to get this everything up. We have got to get this under control, and we have got to exploit our domestic energy sources. You know, I agree with Judge Carter. Texas is the leader in wind farms. It's a beautiful sight as I drive down Ocean Drive in Corpus Christi looking across the bay at the windmills across over by Sinton, Taft, and Portland. That's the future. But you can't put a windmill on a car. You've got to have oil and gas to run your cars. Now, we can get into a discussion about we probably need to be focusing on getting cars working on natural gas as a more cost-effective way to do it. We've got a great abundance of gas now, of natural gas. But we have got to get rid of the moratorium, the de facto moratorium that is crippling the oil and gas industry in the Gulf of Mexico. It's running prices up. It's costing us jobs in Texas. And, you know, I want to talk just for a second, if you don't mind, Judge Carter, about the portrayal of the oil and gas industry as being an evil industry. It's real easy to talk about these big corporations, big oil and gas producers like Exxon and BP. I've got two things to say about that. First of all, I imagine if you've got a retirement plan or a pension, you're an owner of one of these oil and gas companies. Your pension plan, your mutual fund, they're all investors in these companies. But that being said, really the bulk of the oil and gas are produced by small businesses, by independent operators who are 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20-man operations that take a chance, go out there and explore and drill, and every time they find a prospect, they go out there, raise some money, they put their money on the line, and they are on the line. If they drill a dry hole, they're going to have to struggle to get their next paycheck. But this is the entrepreneurial spirit that built America. These men and women are not evil. They are our neighbors. They're concerned about the environment. They're concerned about this country, and they want the price of gasoline that you put in your car to be reasonable. They're not profit gouging. You know, we can show charts about how the price of gas is going up and why it's going up. But, you know, we don't really have to, it's not that hard of a question to look at. If you took a middle school government class, you studied economics and finance, you learned about something called supply and demand. And supply, especially in this country, is down because we can't drill and produce offshore. We can't drill and produce in massive areas of land that's controlled by the federal government. And we've got a regulatory scheme that's looking at making new technologies to produce energy more expensive and possibly illegal. So the supply is down. Then you look across the globe at our competitors, China, India, Korea. All of these countries are seeing newfound wealth. The old movies where the Chinese were riding around on bicycles, that's not the way it is in Beijing anymore. The Chinese are driving cars. Their factories are using oil and gas. And they're competing on the international market for that oil and gas. Our national security, our economic security, and our very freedom lies in exploring, finding, and producing our domestic energy resources. That's the way we're going to keep America free. That's the way we're going to keep the cost of our goods and services down. And that's the way we're going to keep the price of gasoline in check. Thank you, Judge. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. And as an expansion of what you just said, let's talk about some of the things that this House, the Democrats in this House, and the President have talked about as a solution to the high price of gasoline. And that is they're going to cut the tax breaks for the oil producers, and they name, you know, Chevron, Exxon, BP, the big, what they call the majors. And they're going to cut those tax breaks, and therefore they're going to make sure that those billions of dollars worth of profit are not going to be there, because they're going to reduce these tax breaks they've given them, which they say are billions of dollars. Well, let's just stop and look at what these tax breaks are about. All the oil and gas produced offshore in other countries is not subject to American taxation, and that's where the majors now produce somewhere between 80 and 90% of all the productions of the majors in the country. And in fact, those drilling inside the continental United States, almost all those people drilling shallow water offshore, and a few of those people drilling deep water offshore, and none of those people are majors. They're all from you were talking about the entrepreneur spirit of the wildcatter and the small producer who is going out in an attempt to expand domestic production. And by the way, they're the only ones that take advantage of any tax breaks that are there. And they're not billion-dollar companies that we use as examples. So the cuts are not even, the way I understand it, not even going to affect ExxonMobil or affect Chevron or these big producers from overseas, because those tax breaks don't pertain to that production. It only pertains to production in the United States. And those are done by independents. Almost the vast majority are done by independents. So the only people that get hurt, again, by the tax policies of the Barack Obama administration of the small businessmen. Just like everything we see coming down the pike at us seems to be targeted at the small independent entrepreneur who's trying to make it go. So don't be misled to think that the majors we see all these massive amounts of money they're making are the target that's really going to be hit by the shot that our colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle have proposed that we should take in getting rid of all, as they call them, subsidies, which is really tax breaks to the producers of domestic production. And by the way, they've put all offshore production offshore. They've shut it down. Just recently, Shell Oil Company, after dumping a couple of $1 billion in an offshore operation in Alaska, off the coast of Alaska, pulled out completely because before they could even get started, after dumping a couple of $1 billion with a B into that production field out there, the EPA came in with more and more stops and stop orders and other things, so they finally just threw up their hands and said, we're going someplace else. We're not drilling in American waters anymore. It's not worth it. So right now, where we know we have production for oil and gas, we have an administration that is fighting that production tooth and nail. This has cost jobs in the industry, as we pointed out. This has made our dependence on foreign oil bigger. Here's the price of the skyrocketing price of the Obama administration since he's been in office. Here is another chart that shows you the offshore field production of crude oil in thousands of barrels per day. And look at this. This is where that production was, 250,000 barrels up to 400,000 barrels, down again, I guess that was in '99. In the Clinton administration, it went down, back up in the Bush administration, into the Bush administration, boom, down to 100,000 barrels of offshore production today, from 400,000 to 100,000 since the Obama administration. Nobody can argue that the Obama administration is anything but violently opposed to the oil and gas industry. And they are doing everything they can to throw big roadblocks in front of production. And then you wonder why the speculators are saying, you know what, $5, the price of a barrel of oil is going up because they're speculating. You know how many millions of gallons of aviation fuel a company like American Airlines or United Airlines or Continental Airlines, any of these major airlines burns every week? Do you know what they have to do in order to stay ahead of increasing prices on fuel? They have to speculate on futures on the cost of fuel. And when you speculate, and I'm not blaming the airlines, there's plenty of other people that are speculating because they say, let's see, what's going on in the world? We're finishing up in a war in Iraq, which is one of the major producers, but it's been out of the market for years and it's barely getting back in. We're sitting here with a moratorium on all the offshore domestic production. We're not opening up any federal lands for production anywhere in this country. The Obama administration has shut down any of the leasing practices on any public lands. And by the way, Texas is the only state in the union that didn't turn their public lands over to the federal government. But the rest of the country, in areas like Idaho, Utah, we know there's production up there, up in Wyoming, up in Montana, all that stuff that the Canadians are now producing across the border. The fields on our side of the border are being curtailed by the administration. They just don't want to produce oil. They just want to buy it from foreign sources. And these foreign sources, as the people who study the market, they say, my gosh, Libya is not available anymore. Iraq's not available. What happens if we got no production at home? The market looks shaky. We better buy futures on oil. And guess what? The price goes up. It doesn't take rocket scientists to say they see a shortage coming down the pike. They're competing with India and China, two of the biggest competitors we've got for any kind of energy that's out there. And then we're going to sit here and we're not going to buy the chance to buy fuel at a cheaper price now than what it might be 6 months down the road, of course speculators are going to do that. Of course industry is going to do that. So as my friend Blake was pointing out, the lack of production, the lack of faith in in what this government is going to do to this industry, and the fear that the shutdown will be complete, it just sets up in this situation for the price to go up. When the price goes up, then the price of gasoline goes up. And by the way, if you take, either you add more taxes to the cost of the oil production, or you take away the tax breaks for oil production, who do you think is going to pay that increase in cost for the oil industry? Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be the guys and the gals that are filling their cars up with gasoline at the pump. To the extent that any business has an increase in cost of their production, they do the very best they can to pass that cost on to the consumer. That's the way any company, whether it's steel, whether it's widgets, whether it's buggy whips, whatever it is that you produce, if your cost goes up, the manufacturer passes it on to the extent that he can and still stay within the price limits that are set not by the government but by the demand of the consumer, then the price goes up. So you're not going to lower prices by taking away subsidies to the oil and gas industry. The only thing you can do is raise prices. It's not going to lower prices to discourage production. That's ridiculous. If you have the law of supply and demand and we got a short supply and you're discouraging production, the price is going up. You learned that in the 8th grade, as Blake pointed out. This is not hard stuff. This is easy stuff to figure out. Sometimes I think some of these folks that don't understand the oil business, the only oil they know is what's on the end of their dipstick in the crankcase. But the facts are, this product is a major product to the modern society of the American public. And I think the American public know it. And I don't think they're going to get fooled by demagoguery on these prices. My colleague wishes to have more comments.
If you don't mind, Judge, I wanted to reiterate what you were saying. You know, demonizing the speculators isn't a way to do it. The speculators are the users. They're the airlines. If you want to double what your vacation's going to cost, you take away the airline's ability to hedge their fuel prices. And you know what? If you want to stick it to the speculators, let's open the spigot, and those guys betting on higher prices are in trouble. They're going to lose some money on that. So I just wanted to reiterate. I wanted to definitely reiterate that fact. And you know, if you take a look at what this nation's policy is today on the oil and gas industry, if you were trying to concoct a way to run up gasoline prices, you probably couldn't come up with a better way to do it than we're doing now. It is like we are intentionally trying to raise oil prices. We're limiting production. We're making production more expensive. We're using our regulatory agencies to make it more difficult to drill. We're not leasing any of our land. If somebody had come to my office and said, Blake, how can we make gasoline more expensive? I'd list out exactly what the executive branch and the federal agencies, the regulatory agencies, are doing. I can't think of a way to run the prices up that they haven't. If, as we are hearing, the President's goal is to get prices down, the 8th grade is the answer. Increase the supply. That's all it takes. And it's easy to increase the supply. Sure, we can't flip the switch and do it overnight. But in a matter of months, as we open up federal lands for leasing, as we reopen the Gulf, as we get the permitting process under control, those prices will turn around and they will go down. Helping the oil and gas industry lower prices does not mean we abandon alternative energy. All of the above is the answer. I think some people on the other side of this aisle and in other offices in this town believe that it's either or. Let's strangle the oil and gas companies so our friends in the alternative energy can thrive. It's not like that. The energy demands of a modern world are such that all of the above is a correct answer. Wind, solar, safe nuclear, and a stronger reliance on natural gas that is in the ground in supplies just 5 years ago we couldn't have imagined with the breakthroughs in technology we have producing shale gas. Coal. There's no one answer. Every watt of electricity, every BTU, everything we do lowers the cost and raises the standard of living of everybody here and abroad. I am sick and tired of less, either or. This is the United States of America. This is the 21st century. Yes, we can. We can have it all, and we start at the pump. Thank you, Judge. I yield back.
I thank you for yielding back. And there are consequences to any action that you take in this town. I wanted to point out something I said in a committee hearing one time. We were having this debate. I said, those people who want to do away with oil and gas and have wind industry as the solution better strap a sail on their Volkswagen and hope the wind's blowing towards Washington tomorrow morning, or we're going to have a severe employment shortage in the U.S. Capitol. But seriously, it's more than that. Look at this quote from the Heritage Foundation. How many jobs does the anti-drilling agenda of this administration cost? The cost in jobs is startling. A new analysis by a Louisiana State University professor, Joseph Mason, projects national job losses at 19,000 from the drilling moratorium, with wage losses at $1.1 billion. About 1/3 of those jobs are located outside the Gulf region. So not only did the people in the Gulf lose jobs, and do they continue to lose jobs, but these jobs, believe me, there is somebody somewhere within a 100-mile radius that we are right now that is producing something that goes into the production of oil and gas, because it is a nationwide and a worldwide industry, and all of the machinery and all of the other complicated gauges and all the modernization of the production of petroleum, all of that is far beyond just the state of Texas and Louisiana and the other Gulf states. It circumvents the whole globe. So jobs is another important reason why we have got to do something about this whole concept that this administration seems to have, that we are evil because we produce oil and gas. And yet, guess what? States that were criticizing us for production of natural gas 2 years ago are dancing around campfires in their states now that they learn that they've got shale oil in their states. And some of our Midwest and Eastern friends seem to all of a sudden be really excited about the fact that they've discovered they've got shale gas beneath their land, and they can produce good, clean natural gas. And I say more power to them. And I hope they can. And I hope their states and this federal government doesn't throw up roadblocks to the production of that shale gas, because it is safe. This fear of fracking is a hoax, because we have been doing fracking in the oil industry for 50 years. It's just amazing how all of a sudden a process that is almost normal to production, to get the second round of production out of almost any old well that was drilled in Texas, is using some form of H2O fracking, water fracking, to get that second round of production out of a well. And people rework and rework and rework existing wells with all types of processes like fracking and fracking. And that's fracturing is what that means. So but are there solutions that can bring the price of oil and gas down? Yes, I think there are. Here's one that our good friend Doc Hastings has proposed. Reversing the President Obama's offshore moratorium, establishing a national domestic oil and natural gas offshore production goal to ensure a continued development of America's offshore energy sources. That's H.R. 1231. Hopefully we're going to have that bill on the floor of the House this week or next week. This is important. This is showing real leadership in real energy production. And you see nothing on there says, let's shut down windmill production, or let's shut down solar production, or let's shut down nuclear production, or hydroelectric, or anything else. It's saying, let's produce energy in the form of petroleum products. Another real gas price solution. Restarting America's offshore leasing now, H.R. 1230, Doc Hastings again. Require the sale of specific offshore leases within a set time limits instead of continued administration delays. It is proposed Central Gulf leases in the Gulf of Mexico within 4 months, Western Gulf within 8 months, offshore Virginia within 1 year, additional Central Gulf of Mexico by June 1st, 2012. This bill sets out a roadmap to leasing for production in what we consider our Gulf of Mexico. You know, when it comes to producing of products offshore, the first place it ever happened was offshore Texas. And we've considered that Gulf to be sort of our little saltwater lake out there ever since. Now, that's not exactly true. In fact, it's not true at all. But the point is, to stop the production that's been going on, well, since I was a small child in the Gulf, and I'm no young whippersnapper, well, this starts us back to doing what we do well, producing offshore. Another Doc Hastings bill. And this is one putting the Gulf of Mexico back to work. Require new safety permits to prevent and combat blowouts before drilling. No one in the industry, and I've talked to literally hundreds of people about the industry, everybody agrees. They are all, you know, they were very proud of the fact that until the BP oil spills looked like they were going to be a thing of the far ancient past. But because that Mexico blowout was, what, 20-something years ago?
Yeah, I was a child.
Yeah. So here's the second, it requires the second.